Greetings, non-West art appreciation. I hope you're doing fantastically well. Greetings from the plains of the Serengeti, just south of Kenya. I'm in Tanzania right now. I hope all of you are doing fantastically well. Today, we're going to be talking about how you become a man and a woman around the world, and specifically then looking at the African context. Enjoy.
Hello, I'm Simon Whistler, you're watching Top 10's Net, and in the video today, we're looking at the top 10 brutal tests of manhood from all around the world. Medical experts will tell you that a boy is biologically considered a man when some parts of the body are already fully developed. Others will argue that a kid only becomes a real man if he engages in macho activities like careless sex, fighting, or excessive drinking. On the other hand, there are those who strongly believe that a man can only be called a real man if he possesses certain traits such as bravery, dignity, accountability, humility, and so much more. It can all be pretty confusing, right? Well, in some parts of the world, becoming a real man is actually very simple. All you need to do is participate in a certain initiation ritual, even if it means undergoing extreme physical and psychological pain. We're going to be looking at some of those rituals in today's video. The top 10 brutal tests of manhood from all around the world. Number 10, erasing of childhood memories, Canada. The Algonquin tribe consider childhood a mere obstacle to becoming a real man. As such, they conduct initiation rituals on their young boys designed to completely erase their childhood memories. For 14 to 21 days, young members of the tribe are kept in special cages where they are forced to eat nothing but waisoken, a very powerful hallucinogenic. It does not only cause memory loss, but can also induce other serious side effects such as loss of speech, palpitations, extreme delusions, aggression, loss of movement, weakness, and even death. After 14 to 21 days, the young initiates are examined. If they have completely forgotten their childhood, then they have passed the ritual and are considered real men. On the other hand, if their memories have not been completely erased, they need to undergo the brutal ritual again. Number 9, naked bull jumping in Ethiopia. Once in every generation, the Karo tribe performs an initiation ritual that requires its male population to jump over a number of bulls, wearing only their birthday suits. Sounds easy and fun, right? Well, not really. This seemingly festive ceremony has a horrible implication. Even if a man is already full grown, he is still considered a boy if he has not performed the bull jumping ceremony. Being a boy in the Karo tribe means two things. First, boys cannot marry, and second, they need to kill their children. Karo babies who were born before their fathers have participated in the initiation ritual are considered illegitimate, and according to Karo laws, illegitimate children are not allowed to live. This tradition of killing illegitimate babies is called mingi. Mothers fill the mouths of their babies with soil and leave them in the wilderness to die. Only until their husbands have performed the bull jumping ritual can Karo mothers let their innocent babies live. Number 8, traditional circumcision during adolescence in the Philippines. Getting circumcised is a big deal in the Philippines. In fact, a report conducted in 2011 showed that 93% of Filipino men are cut. What's more interesting is that Filipino boys are not circumcised during babyhood. Instead, they normally undergo circumcision at the age of 12. Filipino boys are only considered real macho men if they are circumcised already. Until then, they are viewed as weak and cowardly by society and are ridiculed as supot, uncut by their friends. To stop the embarrassment and bullying, Filipino boys urge their parents to get them circumcised. There are two ways of getting circumcised in the Philippines, the modern medical way and the traditional way. In traditional circumcision, anesthesia is not used. Instead, boys are given guava leaves. It is generally believed that chewing guava leaves lessens the pain caused by the operation. Instead of a knife, what is used during the painful traditional procedure is a piece of wood called a saboken. After the foreskin is cut, the penis is then wrapped in white cloth. Number 7, group lion hunting in Kenya and northern Tanzania. In the Maasai tribe, boys are required to hunt lions using only clubs and shields. In the past, boys were required to hunt alone. However, due to the declining population of lions, the tradition has been changed, and it's common nowadays for Maasai boys to hunt in groups. Hunting lions is a very dangerous undertaking, and this is the element of danger which makes this activity a fitting male initiation ritual for the Maasai tribe. When Maasai boys hunt lions, they are demonstrating a kind of behavior that is believed to be possessed only by real men, bravery. It's interesting to note that the Maasai tribe does not hunt lions that are injured or weak. Also, they do not target female lions, since they are believed to be the givers of life. Number 6, skin modification in Papua New Guinea. The Sepik tribes regard crocodiles as highly sacred creatures. They claim to have spiritual and cultural connections with these reptiles. As such, they greatly encourage their young male population to complete a painful rite of passage designed to transform their bodies into crocodiles. With the use of a razor, the elder members of the tribe would cut the skins of the young men over and over again. This painful process produces beautiful patterns that highly resemble that of crocodile skin. To complete the ritual, the elders then place ashes on the cuts. Once the ceremony is finished, the boys are declared real men. Nowadays, not all male members of the Sepik tribes are participating in this ritual. This is due to the fact that many members of the tribes are becoming more modernized. Also, this ritual is quite costly, and some parents simply cannot afford it. Number 6. Infliction of bodily pain and poison in Brazil. The Vamatis manhood ritual consists of 4 extremely painful phases. In the first phase, poison is administered into the eyes of young initiates. The Vamatis believe that doing so will help enhance the senses and eyesight of their boys. The second and third phases involve infliction of physical pain as the initiates are whipped and beaten repeatedly. In the final phase, the boys are injected with a poison called campo, which is extracted from the monkey frog. Campo is not hallucinogenic, though it can cause extreme psychological responses. Also, this poison can induce various physical effects such as excessive vomiting, lightheadedness, and uncontrollable bowel movements. The Vamatis tribe strongly believes that campo is capable of enhancing the endurance and strength of their young boys, making them real men and adept hunters. Number 4. Blood purification in Papua New Guinea. The Vimatausda tribe of Papua New Guinea considers women's blood to be unclean or impure. They strongly believe that in order for their boys to become real men, they need to be purified from the unclean influences given to them by their mothers. Elders begin the blood purification process by sliding 2 canes into the throats of the young initiates, causing them to vomit blood. Next, the elders insert reeds into their nostrils, causing them to expel both blood and mucus. Ramming the reeds back and forth is believed to cleanse them from the impure influences they might have breathed from the air. Finally, the elders repeatedly stab their tongues using an arrow-like tool, letting out contaminating influences they have received from their mothers. After completing this excruciatingly painful ceremony, the young initiates return to the community as real men. Blood purification among the Matausas is such an important and secret rite of passage that not all tribe members have witnessed it. Men who do not participate in this extremely painful ceremony cannot enjoy certain adult privileges like getting married. Also, they are viewed as weak members of the tribe, incapable of filling their masculine roles in the community. Number 3. Ceremonial dog killing in Russia. Archaeologists have recently discovered that early Russian tribes required their young men to kill their own dogs. By doing so, these young boys became real men, worthy to become members of their tribe's roving warriors. Further investigation showed that the dogs that were sacrificed were between the ages of 7 and 12. This finding simply means that the canines were not chosen randomly. Instead, they were the pets of the young boys. So what's the logic behind this brutal ritual? In order for the young boys to be transformed into brave, ruthless warriors, they need to be stripped of their innocence first, and the best way to do that is by murdering someone they loved. Number 2. Extreme penis modification happening in Australia. In order for the boys of the Anambal tribe to be considered real men, they need to suffer extreme physical pain first. Elder members of the tribe cut the skin of the boys in various areas of the body, like their buttocks, chest, arms, and shoulders. Before the wounds can heal, they fill them with sand. This is deliberately done so that the wounds would produce decorative scars once they've completely healed. Just like Filipino boys, young Anambal initiates are also required to undergo circumcision. However, the ritual does not end there. Once the boys develop beards, they are required to undergo subincision, a medical procedure in which the underside of the penis is cut open from the base to the pee hole. The Anambal tribe believes that performing this seemingly torturous ritual will make their penises more attractive and lighter. Number 1. Fellatio and semen ingestion in Papua New Guinea. Members of the Samebia tribe strongly believe that in order for boys to become real men, they need to ingest semen. Sambia boys aged 7 to 10 are required to perform oral sex on the older warriors, and in each session they need to swallow the results. The tribe firmly believes that semen is the source of life and the essence of masculinity. The only way for the genitalia of their young male population to become fully developed is through oral sex. In addition, they believe that only by ingesting sperm can their young ones produce their own. However, there are no homosexual implications to this bizarre ritual. Men who engage in the ceremony are not labeled as gays by the Sambia tribe. Once the boys reach the age of 15, they stop becoming the givers of oral sex and start to become the receivers. Also, boys who are of the same age or are friends are not allowed to engage in oral sex with each other. Surprisingly, it isn't unusual for conflicting men within the tribe to engage in this ritual. Once the men get married, they are prohibited from further participating in this ceremony. Women's genitals are believed to pollute the reproductive organs of the men, which in turn would make their semen impure. So I won't ask whether you enjoyed that video because it was pretty brutal. I hope that.
So one of the things that actually shows up that we have to deal with today is how do we actually determine when and how one becomes a true man and a true woman in various different societies around the planet. And so the question, of course, becomes why do we need initiations? What is the point of an initiation? Whether it's a fraternity initiation, initiation into manhood, it's the idea of a bar or bat mitzvah in the Jewish tradition, the declaration of manhood that shows up in womanhood. What does this actually add to society? And so there is a very famous anthropologist whose name was Van Gennep, who actually talks about the rites of passage ceremony. He basically says the following, that there are American rites of passage, some more important than others, like any others. Your first day of school, prom, college graduation, birth of your first child, your driver's license, your high school graduation, your 21st birthday, marriage. And these life transformations become social events that mark us somehow as different than us even the day before. College graduate, the day before, not a college graduate, only a high school graduate. And so the whole idea is there's this rite of passage that actually takes place. Unmarried, probably your life is very similar versus married in the modern day world. And so there's something different about the next day that shows up. And so this gives us the idea of how do we socialize our men and women? What does gender mean in our world today? How are we gender socialized? And so here's a great one where we talk about the battle of the brain, the male brain versus the female brain, but men versus women differences in debate discussion. Here we have women with babies and respect, security, talk, love. Over here, sex, food, sex, TV, beer, football, and sex. Because men generally have a little bit higher of a sex drive than women. Note the male brain is 10% larger than the female brain over here. It's stronger from the front to back, which is really about connections and logical connections that show up with rationality. And we have the optimized for motor skills. The female brain has much more gray matter. And so the idea of kind of the plasticity of the brain, particularly if there's any damage, but to be able to make neural connections and potentially even form much stronger memories that show up. The female brain is stronger from side to side. And so the left brain, right brain, much less predominant within the female brain is in the male brain, which allows very intuitive thinking, going back and forth between logic and emotionality. So there's some truth to the idea that men are more rational and women really think much more in the idea of intuitive, emotional thinking that combines that with logic, right? The brain actually talks about that. And so here becomes one of the kind of other, how are we socialized?
Have you ever met a friend's parents and realized that your friend was basically a mini-me of their mom? Not just because they both have brown hair or a pointy nose. It's how they talk, the way they both like making silly puns, their attitudes and beliefs. Now, the question is, how much of that similarity is genetic? And how much is just a function of the fact that your friend grew up with their mom and pretty much learned how to be a human being by watching her? This is the age-old question. Nature or nurture? Nature is the part of human behavior that's biologically determined and instinctive. When a baby latches onto your finger and won't let go and it's basically the cutest thing in the whole world, it's not because they learned to do that. It's natural. A lot of human behavior, however, isn't instinctive. It comes instead from how you're nurtured. The nurture part of behavior is based on the people and environment you're raised in. And it's this second part, the social environment that determines human behavior, that sociologists tend to investigate and have many different theories about. To a big extent, we develop our personalities and learn about our society and culture through a social process, one known as socialization. Sounds legit, right? But what happens if you don't have people around you? Social isolation affects our emotional and cognitive development a lot. To get a glimpse into how and why this is, let's go to the thought bubble to look at sociologist Kingsley Davis's case studies on Anna. In the winter of 1938, a social worker investigated a report of child neglect on a small Pennsylvania farm and found, hidden in a storage shed, a 5-year-old girl. That 5-year-old girl was Anna. She was unwanted by the family she was born into and was passed from house to house among neighbors and strangers for the first 6 months of her life. Eventually, she ended up being kept in a shed with no human contact other than to receive food. Kingsley Davis observed Anna for years after her rescue and wrote about the effects of this upbringing on her development. When Anna was first rescued, she was unable to speak or smile and was completely unresponsive to human interaction. Even after years of education and medical attention, her mental development at age 8 was less than that of a typical 2-year-old. This is a story with both a sad beginning and a sad ending. Anna died of a blood disorder at the age of 10, and Davis's study of how isolation affects young children was only one of many that have shown how a lack of socialization affects children's ability to develop language skills, social skills, and emotional stability. Thanks, Thought Bubble. There are lots of different theories about how we develop personalities, cognitive skills, and moral behavior, many of which come from our siblings in social science, psychologists. Take Sigmund Freud. You've heard of him, Austrian guy, likes cigars, invented the field of psychoanalysis. One of his main theories was about how personalities develop. He thought we were born with something called an id. You can think of the id as your most basic, unconscious drive, a desire for food, comfort, attention. All a baby knows is that it wants that, and it will scream until it gets it. But then we develop the ego and superego to balance the id. Ego is the voice of reason, the conscious efforts to rein in the pleasure-seeking id. And your superego is made up of the cultural values and norms that you internalize and use to guide your decisions. So if the id is the devil on your shoulder, the superego is the angel on the other shoulder, and the ego is the mediator who intervenes when the angel and devil start fighting. Now, a lot of Freud's work hasn't stood the test of time, but his theories about how society affects our development have influenced pretty much everyone who has researched the human personality. This includes Swiss psychologist Jean Piaget, who spent much of his career in the early 1900s studying cognitive development. While researching ways to measure children's intelligence, Piaget noticed that kids of similar ages tended to make similar mistakes. And this, to Piaget, suggested that there were 4 different stages of cognitive development. First stage, touch everything. Babies learn about the world by grabbing things and sticking them in their mouths. This curious, slobbery interaction with the world is what Piaget called the sensory motor stage, the level of development where all knowledge is based on what you can perceive with your senses. Around age 2, a child enters the next stage, known as the pre-operational stage. At this point, kids learn to use language and begin to ask questions to learn about the world rather than just grabbing stuff. Now they can think about the world and use their imaginations, which leads to playing pretend and an understanding of symbols. But thinking about the world is pretty much limited to how they think about the world. Kids in the pre-operational stage are pretty egocentric. If they love playing with trains and you ask them what their dad's favorite thing to do is, they'll probably say that he loves playing with trains too. It's not until they reach the concrete operational stage, around 6 or 7, that they develop the ability to take in other people's perspectives and begin to make cause and effect connections between events and their surroundings. And in the formal operational stage, at about age 12, Piaget said, kids begin to think in the abstract and use logic and critical thinking. Now, American psychologist Lawrence Kohlberg later expanded on Piaget's model of cognitive development to incorporate stages of moral development. Essentially, kids' sense of what is right begins in what Kohlberg called the pre-conventional stage, where right is just what feels good to them personally. Next, they move to the conventional stage, where what's right is what society and the people around them tells them is right. And then finally, children end up in the post-conventional stage, where they begin to consider more abstract ethical concepts than just right or wrong. So at a young age, a child doesn't realize that grabbing the candy bar they want at the store is wrong, they just want it. But then a combination of societal norms and being scolded by their parents convinces them that stealing is wrong, no matter how much they want the candy bar. And over time, they learn that morals have gray areas. Stealing is wrong if it's just for fun, but might be considered less wrong if you're stealing to feed your family. Eventually, children reach a point where they're able to think about things like freedom and justice, and realize that societal norms about what's right may not always line up with these principles. Sure, laws against stealing candy may be just, but what about laws that say only certain people can get married? Just because something is a law, is it right? How you feel about that question may depend on your socialization and on your gender. Carol Gilligan, an American psychologist who started out as a research assistant and collaborator of Kohlberg's, explored how girls and boys experience these stages differently. She realized that Kohlberg's original studies only had male subjects, which may have biased his findings. When she expanded the research to look at both male and female children, she found that boys tended to emphasize formal rules to define right and wrong, which she called a justice perspective, whereas girls tended to emphasize the role of interpersonal reasoning in moral decisions, which she called a care and responsibility perspective. Gilligan argued that these differences stem from cultural conditioning that girls receive to fulfill ideals of femininity. She thought that we socialize girls to be more nurturing and empathetic, and that influences their moral interpretation of behavior. The next theory of social development I want to focus on is from American sociologist George Herbert Mead, who was one of the founders of the sociological paradigm we talked about a few episodes ago, known as symbolic interactionism. His work focused on how we develop a self. What makes up the you that is inherently you? Are you born with some inherent spark of you-ness, according to Mead? No. Instead, he believed that we figure out who we are through other people. All social interactions require you to see yourself as someone else might see you, something Mead described as taking on the role of others. In the first stage of development, according to Mead's model, we learn through imitation. We watch how others behave and try to behave like them. You see your mom smile at your neighbor, so you smile too. And Mead observed that as kids got older, they moved on to a new stage, play. Rather than just imitating your mom, you might play it being a mom, taking care of a doll. Assuming the role of mommy or daddy is a kid imagining the world from their parents' perspective. The next stage of development is the game stage, where children learn to take on multiple roles in a single situation. What does that have to do with games? Well, games use rules and norms and require kids to take on a role themselves and develop that role in reaction to the roles that others take on. Team sports are a great example of this. When you're playing soccer, you need to not only know what you're going to do, but also what your teammates and your opponents will do. If you were ever the kid who ended up running the wrong way on the soccer field because you didn't realize the ball had switched possession, you know how important it is to anticipate what other people do. The last stage in Mead's model occurs when we learn how to take on multiple roles in multiple situations. In this phase, we weigh ourselves and our actions not against one specific role, but against a generalized other. Basically, a manifestation of all of our culture's norms and expectations. Now, you might have noticed that all of these theories focus on childhood. So does that mean that your personality is set once you hit 18? No. Definitely no. As anyone over 18 will tell you, you keep growing well past high school. And that's why yet another theorist, German-born psychologist Erik Erikson, came up with his own 8-stage theory of development that goes all the way from infancy to old age. He based these stages on the key challenges of each period of life. When you're a toddler, for example, your biggest challenge is getting what you want, or as Erikson puts it, gaining autonomy, which helps you build skills and confidence in your abilities. But once you're a young adult, you've got plenty of autonomy. Now, a bigger challenge is developing intimate relationships, falling in love, finding friends. There's a reason that's the focus of every 20-something sitcom. And this list goes on. Every life stage from when you're born to when you die features different expectations that inform what we see as markers of social development. Moving out, getting married, having kids, they're all societal markers of social development as an adult. But whether you feel like one or not, adulthood will come for us all. And it's your socialization that will determine how exactly you perform the role of adult. Next week, we'll talk about the different agents of socialization that shape who we really end up being. Today, we learned about social development, starting with the role of nature and nurture in influencing a person's development. We talked about social isolation and the importance of care and human interaction in early years for proper emotional and mental development. Then, we talked about 5 theories of development: Freud's id, ego, and superego, Piaget's 4 stages of cognitive development, Kohlberg and Gilligan's theories of moral development, Mead's theory of self, and Erik Erikson's life stage theory. Crash Course Sociology is filmed in the Dr. Cheryl C. Kinney studio in Missoula, Montana, and it's made with the help of all of these nice people. Our animation team is Thought Cafe.
So when we think about the idea of initiation and of becoming man and woman, or becoming gender specific, if there is a gender binary, which there is in almost every culture around the world, and the ones that don't are really kind of the odds to the norm. So us in the modern day world, where we think of gender fluidity as being really gender fluid, we are an exception to the norms, the vast majority of human history. So we need to think about how we are socialized, as we talked about here, whether it's the imitation model that leads to us developing, whether it's the game theory model as we're developing, but there's always a training process of socialization that shows up. So here's how the Mandinka from Gambia handle a man's initiation. This is a fairly typical of West Africa.
Well, the lad or me, Nakaraporo, and yet an alpha, the Kanyake, Adu Senero, Cinema Senero, what am Nakarapori, did not know sooner, movements that in Masuna, or Missionaire, or an alpha, Parangata Macaola, Golo, Handy, Loyat. Remember, I did what I said, I remember I did what I said. For Janning Fow.
Ni sama di nur kita yang de kasaya. Ka kino minta be ka hole wa kino.
And if our videos ever skip out like this one is just done, you can always go into the online version. And there is actually a download of these particular ones for you to actually play. So I'm going to fast forward just a little bit and see if we can't get to play here. Okay. So there's always this idea of separating from the community so that you break the bonds between the mother in particular and the son through pain then bonds with the other people that are about the same age. That's why when you go away to college, oftentimes your first friend group that you make becomes some of the greatest friend groups you have for the rest of your life. It's a scary time and you bond very quickly with those people. Oftentimes masqueraders come in to actually help separate, and the boys are going to learn how to dance masquerade, which is very much a male profession in almost all parts of Africa. No, ceremony like this with the removal of the child used to last as long as 6 months to a year. But today, as we move more and more to the modern day world, this is generally sometimes just on weekends or up to 6 weeks during their summer break or their winter break during school. But it's literally how you're educated to be a man or a woman, including the roles of parent. We don't have anything like this in the Western world. And so know how many parents we actually have struggled that don't have basic parenting techniques. It's the idea that, oh, you'll figure it out. No, we don't always figure it out. And the importance of socialization, particularly the early child, it's much better if you get that training when you're in the bush.
Nal pal me nga karala in sankure nyol sankure jamba nyol nga wala karala ani seri jambam mo faron karala wala mun alfal ani mara mundu nga faron karala bidun dege ndega na kuma sewni sayente Ameda kar ngasanyi kan sabani lubye kwedu rate biri sara lo ndar mo nan jaw da ko sara roja
woli on be bonni yo no tamira sina dindul Kamirang Londi Kadindo Karundal, Kamirang Kosi, Ka Pasunke, Kindemuje. Ye Pasi Isake, Yamuneti, Yo Paro.
Kunjung kenjung. Sampai nanti ke balik mampu dia mana ya? Dah baru. Kewanya.
Isi Kebalinya, Kebalinya lo. Isi Obe Foy. Ni tahu so kalau jadi nak jalan. Ni Kebali nyado nyama. Isalong ka ajina. Ni Kebali nyalo ka isalong ka ajina. Yo kadindo lu pulau ni tel. Kunjung korong meneti. Ani keba mata domorola si kunjil. Ulu si keba formano si jano. Ye yang kate. Ni meneti.
So when we look through this, you'll note as we're looking at the male and female, because women also go through a similar process, and many women traditionally were excised, or you have a piece of the clitoris removed, or a part of the vaginal hood, which we'll talk about here, different types of female genital mutilation, FGM or excision. A lot of these practices are slowly starting to be considered too barbaric, and so many African ethnicities now are moving across from it. So the Dogon, here's a Kanaga male masquerade, where they make their own masquerade in this, and the symbol of a splayed reptile. So becoming a man, woman in Africa. This is the only masquerade that we saw earlier on that was danced by women in Africa. Men are taught masquerading, which is a masculine element. They're taught how to farm and hunt, so they actually have a way of entering into the business economy. They're actually taught how to be a father and husband, and they're giving sex education in the bush as well. They talk about how to use nature to make people healthy and heal their children. They're talking about myths, the ancestor, dancing, and sex. No, the very bottom, women are also taught those exact things. So these are things that everyone in the community is actually interested in: ancestors, dancing, and sex. Women are taught about the spirit world, but not specifically about masquerading and the dances that go along with it. They're taught how to cook, gather food, the same way the gender binary of farming and hunting over here. They're taught the roles of mother and wife here, specifically over father and husband. So they literally are taught how to train for becoming a mother, and how to care for an early child. The use of nature here is the nature meds. They're responsible literally for being mini herbal doctors. So if you have aspirin, so you don't have to go to an herbal doctor, or your child has diarrhea, what do you do? What can you do? And then lastly is housekeeping. So there's very gendered binaries, but note the bottom three, both groups share. Ancestors, dancing, and sex are considered three of the most individuals. So they're taught literally to pleasure the other gender as part of a committed, loving adult relationship. So here's that Monday So Why masquerade, and I'll pick up from where we about left it off last time. Remember, women dance coming out of the bush, out of their initiation, and they're prepared for marriage when they come out. Each mask is individual. The small, slight eyes looking down are generally a symbol of demurement. It's going to have a very high sheen function. And here you'll often see these rolls. These are fat rolls, because to be fat in Africa is to be considered wealthy and healthy. So if you're very skinny, actually, this does often shock Americans, even for skinny Americans. Wow, you're looking really fat today. You're like, I know I'm on vacation, but really you're paying compliments. They might have fancy headdresses for women who want to emphasize their beauty. They might have an individual with a book on their head for someone who wants to emphasize their education. They might have a woman that has a cooking pot showing that she's a great cook and she aspires to be a great homemaker. So women have different gender roles that they want to. And women and men and their families, as they design these arranged marriages, you can see the scarification patterns as well, they match these up. So when women come out of the bush, they are ready to get married. They've been educated to be a woman. Here's another different initiation ceremony. This one, the Fulani,
known for their nomadic ways,
male initiation for
and for some of
nomads.
the world's more painful rites of passage. In a remote region of northern Benin, West Africa, Lopate prepares for his initiation ritual with the help of his older brother. Clans will gather from 50 miles around to see if he is braver than his opponent in a violent whipping match.
If I lose, I will be shamed, because everyone from all of the different clans will be watching.
Back at the village, the boys enlist their father's aid in choosing a branch that will inflict the most painful blow. Their father sharpens the stick so it will break the opponent's skin. Finally, it's time to head off to battle. Lopate is excited, in spite of the bloody test that awaits him. Meanwhile, a young Fulani woman is undergoing her own rite of passage into adulthood. Today, Maude will receive a full set of traditional facial tattoos and become a woman. Maude's tattoos will be done by a local artist, Gokure. He readies the needles he will use to make thousands of tiny pricks in Maude's face. The hours-long ritual will test the girl's bravery. If she cries or shows pain, then she will be shamed, and the tattooing may be delayed until she is older. Before inscribing the painful tattoo, Gokure paints elaborate designs. Each carries a special meaning for the Fulani. Eyes on her temples will allow Maude to keep watch on her husband at all times. Cow tracks symbolize prosperity.
The beginning is the most painful.
Blood begins to mix with the ink, but the artist continues. After more than 3 hours, the work is complete. According to Fulani tradition, Maude is now a beautiful woman ready to consider marriage. Maude has finished her initiation rite, but Lopate is about to face his own test. Lopate learns that his opponent will be a boy named Mati from a neighboring clan. First, Lopate will whip Mati 3 times, and then he will have to endure the same. Whoever hits the other the hardest and flinches the least when hit himself will be declared the winner. The crowd will determine who is bravest. It is an impressive performance. Mati's clan celebrates his bravery by showering him with white talc powder and placing coins on his forehead as a congratulatory gesture. Now it is Lopati's turn to be beaten. The crowd roars. He barely flinched when struck by his opponent's weaker blows, and he's won the match. Though Bapati's skin is broken, his spirit is not.
It is burning me. It really hurts. But I am full of joy. I am very proud because I have won.
Bapati has endured a painful ordeal and become an adult member of the Fulani tribe.
There's also female initiation ceremonies, as we talked about, besides the Mende. Remember, women are also removed, or young girls are also removed from the crowd. It used to be 6 months to a year. And so here they're welcoming the women back that have actually been gone for so long. And they're coming back fully fledged women ready to get married in their community. So here's the celebration. So in this particular ethnicity, there is no excision. So then there's a house party for the girls besides the community when they return back to their homes. In some communities, it's important for the women to get fatter. And so amongst the Kalabari Ijaw, which we saw earlier, they're the ancestral figures of the Dwayne Fubara, those Pokia family of carvers. Here is Monday's girls, which is girls go through fattening houses. So they try to get as fat as they can when they're on initiation, being fed the fattest materials that happen to be there.
Ugoloma is an island town in the river district of southern Nigeria.
Now, boys never go through a fattening house. This would only be for women and only for certain ethnicities, like the Kalabari Ijaw.
13th century, when the founding father, Ofologaya, settled on the island with his family. The population of about 20,000 depend on fishing and trading for their livelihood. For as long as anyone can remember, young women in Ugoloma who are deemed ready to marry and have children go through a unique initiation called the Iria ceremony.
And that's over here.
Iria is a rite of passage from childhood to womanhood.
And Iriabo are the people who are initiated into the ceremony of womanhood.
Along with 13 other girls, 17-year-old Florence will be paraded before the town to have her chastity certified. She will then be confined alone for 5 weeks in what is known as a fattening room, before emerging healthy and plump and ready for marriage. Florence grew up in Ugoloma. To her, it's an honor to take part in the ceremony.
So a lot of girls and women who live in major metropolitan areas like Nairobi or Dar es Salaam will go to the village and go home and do this, and then come back to the the city as a fully fledged member of the female community as a woman.
After spending 10 years in the city, 22-year-old Asikia is returning to Okoloma for the first time.
So an older woman's going to go through it too. Older woman being 22, normally you're a teenager when you go through it.
Asikia is a music student, an outspoken modern woman with mixed feelings about the Iria ceremony.
My mother, she wants me to do it because she feels that every girl is supposed to do it because that is the belief they have, you know. I told her I will do it if she will, you know, meet my needs, I'll do it. You know, she had to make me happy by paying me some money and all the things I want her to do for me.
Women hold a special status because they're past their menopause. Florence's grandmother, Monday Moses, is their president. Her word is law. In 2 days' time, Monday's girls will be confined and out of sight in the fasting rooms. So any public appearance now is a cause for great excitement. Great excitement.
They go into the fattening room for 5 weeks and then come back sometimes 20 pounds heavier because they're fed the most fattening, best food that the family can provide, which increases their marriage status because, again, as I mentioned in Africa, fat is a compliment all throughout Africa. There's various different societies that do all across. We'll be looking at the Mande later on. This is the Tone Society where men learn to mask and then parade back as masqueraders. We have the monkey warrior male initiation that takes place. I don't need to go through all of these, but this is actually. So one of the things that comes up in the Western world we have to deal with is what are we going to do, or what should be our response for female genital mutilation or excision. Circumcision we've done all around the world. So the removal of the foreskin generally does no permanent harm from a masculine element in any way, shape, or form. We early on argued it was about cleanliness and purity. The scientific community is absolutely out, so that's probably not the case in the modern day world. But we do face a challenge here then with universal human rights versus cultural relativism. Is the idea of the removing of the clitoris or a piece of the clitoris or the entire clitoris actually a violation of human rights that should never be performed? Or is it something that each culture should be able to choose what they want to do to the young girls? Remember, because it is parents that are choosing it for their own children. Now, there are societal consequences without question. A woman who does not go through this ceremony in a society where it is mandatory will find it very difficult to find a marriage partner unless she goes on to the city in a more modern lifestyle. It is generally done all over. And so, but some countries have banned female genital mutilation and called it as such rather than excision as being barbaric or as being illegal to be performed on anyone. The United States happens to be one of those, Canada, a lot of Europe, and we've started to outlaw it in certain parts of Africa, and yet it's still very prevalent. The reason why it was banned at all in Africa is because the United States and Europe basically said, we're not going to offer you any loans. So basically they said, we see this as a human rights issue, not as a cultural rights issue. And so if you don't ban it, we're not going to do any trade. We're not going to loan you any money, even though they're post-colonial empires, which Britain, Spain, France, they all said they would actually help support. And so there's a couple of different types of classification of female genital mutilation, some more severe than others. So type 1 is clitoridectomy. It's actually where the clitoris is removed. You can see it up here. So the female side, that's considered because it gets erect during sex. It's more like a masculine. So it was the idea of removing the masculine part of the female. The circumcision of the penis, literally, the folds of the vagina were taken off, and that was seen very much as the feminine part. So there's a counteracting to this. One is the idea where you actually remove the entire clitoral hood, and then you get circumcised up here. You can see you remove that. And the most is infibulation, where literally the vagina is mostly, almost exclusively closed off except for a urinary tract and a place to have sex. And it makes sex actually quite not enjoyable. So women generally don't have orgasm anymore. So this one, almost everyone, even in most parts of Africa and the Middle East where it's practiced, have almost all outlawed this particular. The question is, shouldn't this be considered, and I don't have an answer for you, shouldn't this be considered more of an elective surgery that if the parents want to do, they have the opportunity to do on their own children, the same way if there was something that, a sixth finger, because even though we consider it normal, they do not consider it a normal part of the human body. In fact, it's the male part of the human body. And to be fully female, you have to have that clitoris removed. So you can see the percent of females aged 15 to 49, the vast majority of them, in almost all cases, it's 51% or higher across, even though it's outlawed today, still have this practice throughout much of Africa. And so there are African individuals that are against this as well. So it's not just the outside Western world. There's plenty of proponents in Africa, no surprise. One of the most famous is Ousmane Sembène, who basically made an entire movie called Mulade about this many years ago. He's now since passed. He is Africa's greatest filmmaker. I will mention I got to be a cultural consultant and meet Ousmane Sembène. So the first film I ever worked on, if you look at my IMDb account, is Fadili Frazier. So John Frazier, I'm actually the third one, but known as Fadili Frazier. I got to work on this film itself. So the entire film then, it sort of deals with the social implications for these girls and for society if African women were to kind of combine together. Now, a lot of African women still want the tradition, right? It's part of what they went through. It's part of their socialization. That pain caused the women to bond more with their compadres than with the individuals that are their mothers or grandmothers. And so it forms individuals that will be alive much longer to help within the village. So it's a challenging issue. And so here are basically some extreme body modifications then that take place all the way around the planet, just to show that this is not the only extreme body modification that we have. I mean, even think about the huge, sometimes women will come and say, I want to have pornographic breasts,
beauty.
Making them so
What
large.
is beauty?
And
It is inherently
should a doctor
subjective.
actually do that?
What one culture or even one person finds to be beautiful, another may find strange, wrong, or even ugly. Around the world, many different people and cultures practice a wide variety of body modifications. Some go back centuries and have become a large part of their beliefs and religion. If nothing else, these are incredible examples of the adaptations our human bodies are capable of. Lip plating or lip stretching is one of the oldest body modification practices, dating back as far as 8,700 BC in Sudan and Ethiopia. Why exactly this practice began is unknown, with theories varying from some claiming it was done for beauty or showed higher status, and others saying it made women less attractive from slave traders and rival tribes. While having been practiced throughout the world at different time periods, it is now used by only a small number of tribes, mainly in Africa and the Brazilian Kayopo tribe. These are the Mercy people of the lower Omo River Valley in Ethiopia. Here, women will pierce their lips 6 to 12 months prior to marriage, inserting a small stick. As it heals, slightly larger plates are added until the diameter reaches 8 centimeters, with some stretching as far as 20 centimeters. These clay plates are meant to symbolize a woman's strength and self-esteem, while also displaying their social maturity. Women create their own plates, decorating and including personal accessories. In the small Kayan tribe located in northern Thailand, a common practice of neck stretching takes place. This is done because women with long, slim necks are seen as more desirable. Female children at the tender age of 5 begin taking part in this practice. In order to achieve these desirable necks, these round coils, each weighing up to 4 pounds, are one by one placed around their neck. As time goes on, more and more coils are added, resulting in their collarbone as well as their shoulders being gradually pushed down, this giving the appearance of a longer and stretched out neck. Women of this tribe claim that the coils around their necks begin to be just another part of their bodies. As time goes on, the coils added can reach a staggering 25 high. The reason this tribe views long, slim necks as desirable is because these women more resemble the very important mythical creatures of the Cayenne tribe, dragons. Scarification is a cultural ritual that takes place all over the world within different tribes. Two such tribes are the Sepik River tribes of Papua New Guinea and the Dinka tribe located in southern Sudan. The Dinka tribe practices scarification on the face by using a blistering hot knife to scar line patterns into young boys as well as girls. The boys are scarred to represent their manhood within the tribe. Girls, on the other hand, are scarred with different patterns that are done for beauty. As this takes place, the children rarely, if ever, cry because a reaction to the pain is seen as weak, resulting in them losing respect within the tribe. There are various tribes that practice facial scarification within Sudan, and many variations of scars identify different tribes, as well as the beauty of different women. The other tribes are the Sepik River tribes of New Guinea. This tribe uses scarification as a small part of a large ceremony that lasts weeks at a time. These ceremonies are for boys as an initiation into manhood. After the celebration, these boys are now men, meaning that they now partake in the responsibilities of the other men within the tribe or village. The scars that these young men receive are meant to emulate the rough skin of alligators. The Sepik tribe believes that the alligator consumes any presence of a boy within the body, resulting in the boy now becoming a man. Said to have been inspired by a dancer named Yao Niang, who had bound her feet into the shape of a moon while dancing on her toes for Emperor Li Yu, is feet binding. For almost 1,000 years, young girls in China at the very young age of 5 or 6 would go through the extremely painful process of feet binding. This was the process in which every toe, aside from the big toe, was broken and tightly wrapped under the foot, creating a triangular shape using silk cloth. These girls were then forced to walk long distances in order to break the foot further and to settle the foot into the correct shape. As time went on, the foot would become shorter as the heel and sole of the foot slowly would come together. Extra pieces of skin were even cut off of the foot to correct the shape. The most desired feet would only measure a shocking 3 inches. These smaller feet displayed high social status and wealth. There is an underlying reason many poor mothers would bind their young daughters' feet, and that was to attract powerful and wealthy men. While this was all done in the name of beauty, these girls were often left crippled and deformed, which is why they had to have wealth, as they didn't need their feet to work in fields. Christian missionaries in the 19th century effected social change, meaning today only the very elderly still have these feet. The last woman to have their feet bound can be traced as recently as the 1930s. Among the best known cultures to sharpen their teeth are the Mentawai, an indigenous tribe located in the jungles of Indonesia. These people believe that sharpened teeth represent beauty, in which the sharper and more narrow the teeth are, the more desired a woman is. Sharpening of teeth is a practice that can be traced back as far as the ancient Mayans. The true reasoning behind this is not completely understood today. However, it is believed that the elderly women of these tribes would file down younger women's teeth using different stones as well as water to achieve desired shapes. The sharpening of teeth is seen as beautiful and elegant. Traced back as far as 2000 BC, and maybe among the most well-known body modification tools is the corset. First becoming popular in the 16th century, it reached the height of popularity during the Victorian era. This painful technique was essentially the same as foot binding in China. It was just done to the waist rather than the feet. Women would tightly bind their entire torso just to squeeze their waists and create an hourglass figure. Over time, the corset evolved into different shapes and styles, but the concept remained the same: slim the waist. This practice altered the shape of the rib cage as revealed by this X-ray and would often shift organs like the liver as well as damage the heart and lungs of women who used it. During the 1920s, corsets slowly faded out of common society, and while not as popular as they once were, corsets and tight lacing are still used in modern Western society. The original goal of nose plugs for the women of the Apatani tribe in India was to become unattractive. See, before this tribe began to practice using nose plugs, they were considered to be the most beautiful women among all Arunachal tribes. Thus, they modified their noses and face as a form of protection, believing if they were undesired by the men of other tribes, they wouldn't be kidnapped or sexually assaulted. Women would wear these large wooden plugs in their noses, which over time became tradition. However, this tradition has slowly faded out. This tribe is 26,000 members strong today, which had these women not used nose plugs may have never been possible were they kidnapped by rival tribes. Only the elderly women still use these nose plugs, meaning that when their generation passes, so does this part of their culture and will forever be gone. Otzi the Iceman is a name that you may not be familiar with. He is a frozen mummy who was found by tourists in 1991, dating back to an incredible 3,300 BC. What is important about this discovery is that he is the earliest example of humans using body modification. He was found with tattoos on his back and legs as well as stretched earlobes, measuring a 0 gauge in today's measurements, or about 8 millimeters. Ear stretching has been a custom practiced for thousands of years across multiple tribes. There are various tribes in Africa, Eurasia, and people virtually throughout the entire world who stretch their ears. There are many different techniques in doing so. Some, like the Maasai tribes of Africa, stretch ears using small weights to stretch down their lobes. Others, like the Huarani of the Amazon, also use weights as well as pieces of wood or stone, using increasingly larger pieces to stretch out their earlobes. This tradition holds symbolism and beauty among tribes, often holding religious meaning as well. Among some tribes, stretched ears are believed to fight off evil spirits, as well as witchcraft. This body modification has continued to take place for centuries and is incredibly spread throughout the world, from tribes in Africa to the Western world in Europe and North America. This somewhat alien-looking skull is actually the product of human modification, known as skull elongation, a practice that incredibly shows up all throughout recorded human existence. Skulls like this have been found around the world, from Iraq to Africa, Peru to Russia, and even pharaohs in Egypt, like Tutankhamun, who also happen to have stretched out earlobes. The African tribe of Zari began to place bindings around infants' skull in order to produce the desired effect. When a child is still young, our skulls are very soft. This is because as children, our brains grow extremely fast, often even faster than bones. Because of this, the skull has to be flexible in order to allow for the growth of our brain. This, therefore, allows for the manipulating of how and where the skull grows. When and where exactly this began is unknown since it dates back so far. But what is known is that the Vanuatu people believe that the longer the skull, the more intelligent they are. It is also seen as a greater social status in Borneo. Incredibly, as late as the 1960s, the Mangbetu people of Africa continued skull elongation for beauty. Cameroon, Africa, where maybe the most horrifying and barbaric body modification on this list is practiced: breast ironing and flattening. This is a method used on women to stop girls at the early stages of puberty, around the age of 9, from growing matured breasts. Tightly wrapped bands are placed around young girls' breasts, as well as pounding with spatulas to stop their breasts from developing. Breast ironing consists of stones and steel being heated to extremely hot temperatures over fire before placing them on the breasts of girls in an attempt to melt away the fat within the breast, thus flattening their chest. This dangerous and horrible practice takes place to make women less desirable to men. Strangely, this technique doesn't actually work. When breasts begin to heal, women must go through this procedure again and again, which in turn causes severe psychological and physical damage over time. In early 2016, reports came out of Britain that mothers were using this technique on their children, using spatulas and even hammers to pound down breasts.
So one of the things that shows up is as we look at different variations from around the world of extreme body modifications, which one of these should be sanctioned and allowed, and which one of these are really human rights violations? And that is the challenge. How do we determine a human rights violation if a parent is doing it willingly to their own child? As parents here in the Western world, we want to have control over, and we do the same thing here. You know, I'm not going to get my child inoculated because I don't think that, and yet my child might die because of a disease that's completely preventable. And so we do have those discussions in the Western world as well. Now, that's not actually body modification, but it does put your child at risk when really there's no reason to put your child at risk. Almost everywhere around the world, that last one that you saw with the breast reduction and melting the fat, everyone has condemned that. So this is one where we don't even have a question on whether it's cultural relativism or whether it is abuse. It is abuse. Everywhere, even in almost everywhere in Cameroon, even though some parents do willingly try to do it on their own children, it is still outlawed as a practice in Cameroon today. The issue at hand for us is, what do we do with female excision? Is female circumcision, is male circumcision or excision, or female genital mutilation, are those really human rights or culturally relative? And that's the conversation we need to have. I hope all of you are well. Have a fantastic day. And this is how you become a man or a woman in Africa. It's going through that entire training process with some aspect of pain that unites the group together, breaks the bonds of the family. So now we have a social cohort. And we're going to learn the ideas, as we talked about before. We're going to learn in each case what is the most important aspect of socialization for men and women. Men learn masquerading, farming, hunting, father, husband, use of nature, myths, ancestors, dancing, and sex. Women learn spirit world cooking, gathering food, mother, wife, nature, meds, housekeeping, ancestors, dancing, and sex. And that is really how this happens not just here in Africa, but all over the world. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day. Bye.